Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to those in Yeshiva and also parents and maybe other people as well, students of yours and anyone else who is watching online, also people who I think many people who are not in the right time zone who will want to watch this. Some of your parents have emailed me asking for the link. This is always one of the highlights of not just the Iyun on the role of women in Judaism, but actually the Yeshiva year. And we'd like to welcome people who have been already guests for many years, very numbers of years on there. It's the Iyun, on this Iyun, but this time in our new campus. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Mr. Liora Cymerman, who's been teaching and working in educational management for over 20 years, has degrees from Mitlala and Honor College, and there's a master's from Hebrew University. Amateur Shadchan, that's what you said last time, so maybe you're not amateur.
Still trying.
Okay. And an activist in the community of Modi'in Lit, a Haredi community near Modi'in, also known as Kiryat Sefer, and another children. Rabbanit, Nechama, Goldman, Barash, to my right, teaches at Matan, Pardes, and TBA. So she is familiar with Yosef and Yueza 32. Has taught at Matan's Advanced Talmud Institute for Women, has a master in Talmud from Bar-Ilan, and a graduate of the UX Halacha program, Mishmat. An active member of Beit Hillel, a rabbinic group for improving religious connection between religious and secular.
Yeah, religious and secular, a moderate voice in the religious Zionists.
And is active also in interfaith work. And again, once again, thank you for joining us. And Rabbanit Dena Rock is a teacher in Madresha Lindenbaum, also a graduate of the first graduating class of Yeshiva University's graduate program for advanced Talmudic studies, and coordinates the Matzmidot program and teaches at Lindenbaum, Talmud and Halacha, with also our degrees, BA in Biology and Jewish Studies in State College. So we're very excited to have three educators and great speakers with us who will speak about the questions that you have asked. A few of them I've merged together, so sorry if it's not exactly the way you asked, and also I've added a few as well, and I think will be good. So if you want to have follow-up questions, please put your hand up, and we'll try and make this as interactive as possible, trying to get through all the questions at the end. So let's start with, if you like, a controversial, if you like, the most straight out, is Judaism sexist? Oh, yeah, sure.
I mean, I know that you read that, but I'm just
okay, fine.
Like journey.
Okay. Go for it. Let's do it. Yeah. Okay, fine. So we'll leave Judaism being sexist for just a couple of minutes.
Once you get to know who we are, then you'll understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's actually important.
Yeah.
Okay, whichever one you like.
Go in the middle instead of constantly going.
Okay, so can everybody see what the final question? Oh.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm, as you said, Rabbanit Dena, growing up with my maiden name, now Ra. I actually was just telling Liora that I actually just got remarried this past summer, so actually Ra is a very new addition to me. I'll give a drop of my background. So I grew up in Highland Park, New Jersey. Maybe some of you are from there, that general central Jersey area. My parents were like regular classic modern Orthodox, but just because of location of sort of being central Jersey, all of my teachers were much more Haredi, like we're generally from Lakewood, if that means anything to you, from more like the Pula community. Both in elementary school and in high school I went to Berea. And so for a time in my life, I was kind of more heading in that direction, just because those were my religious role models. Until I kind of, jumped ship somewhere towards the end of high school. I wouldn't say largely per se over women's issues. Actually, it was not mostly over women's issues. It was actually just mostly over like tolerance, open-mindedness, like things like that. anyway, and so I ended up, and I went to Mumbai for a year. I went to actually the Jewish summer high school program for a very formative summer, the summer before my year in Israel. That was where I really actually got introduced to Gemara. I didn't have Gemara, exposure, not in elementary school, not in high school, but on that summer program was like amazing. It was like this totally like eye-opening experience for me. Then I went to my year in Israel. I actually did not continue with Gemara there because this style of this year just didn't it just didn't work for me. But then I went to Stern, and Gemara became like a huge part of like my whole college experience. I majored in Jewish studies, but basically it was like in Gemara. And so like again, I just kind of progressively was moving more towards, I guess, that direction, and like Gemara just really being such a central part of, I don't know, just who I am and my just everything. I'm like my whole relationship with Judaism with that. Anyway, then after that, then I started teaching in my note in Dena, if any of you were in the area. And then I made Aliyah in 2010, and then I teach in Lindenbaum. Again, there are a whole bunch of things in between. Again, I have 3 children. I was divorced, as I mentioned, but remarried this summer. Whatever, again, I'm sure lots of other things will come up that at least I hope gives you a drop of a nutshell of who I am.
One of the reasons we agreed to do it is we like listening to each other. So you guys are kind of just the side benefit. Fun for us.
Okay, so I was born in Israel. My parents are from Chicago. Considered myself for so many years. I don't know if I'm Israeli American, American Israeli. Kids, I tell my kids they're Israeli, but they speak English because they don't know if they should marry American, Israelis. American Israelis. I just say, guys, you guys are Israeli and you speak English. So that's it. You're living in America full time to understand or whatever. So that's a whole other issue. We don't want to make another young man about Israel.
How long do you still feel like an immigrant? Basically forever.
Yeah. Right. So I grew up in Jerusalem area and then in near the Gush in Malaya Most. Yes. And
a Haredi community in
right. So that's where I grew up till I was married from Yerushalayim. I went to the Beis Yaakov system. Then I went to Michlala and Beit Pagan, but my husband is from Toronto, and he went to Orach Chaim High School, and he became more Haredi. We've been living in Kiryat Sefer for forever, like 20 something years. And he's doing Kol. Now he's a Mashiach in Fisher's Yeshiva. Have you heard of it? Fisher's Yeshiva and Moshav Matityahu. And that's about it. You know, I've been working in education, teaching, running schools, founding schools, and it's really supposed to be here.
If I remember correctly, you have 2 master's degrees.
I have 1 master's, 2 bachelor's. By now I'm a lawyer. I got my lawyer's license.
Yeah. And we're always interested in the education of women in the Haredi community. So you always represent for me anyway.
I know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. I'm Nechama Goldman Barash. I grew up, I would say, Philadelphia, Allentown, Philadelphia, to Stern, to Israel. And I would say my journey into becoming an educator who's very focused on feminism, gender, halakha, and those issues, I would say starts in Nechama. A lot of people are surprised I went to Nechama, where I began to study Jewish texts very seriously. I started not so much Gemara, that was available, but I began to recognize there was a world of study that I wasn't familiar with. I also went to a kind of Beth Jacob, which was kind of Beis Yaakov. A lot of it doesn't exist anymore, but a lot of the education was really Haredi in a lot of places. That's where they were drawing teachers from, even though most of our homes were not Haredi. I will say I grew up in a very intellectual home. My dad's a professor of philosophy. My mother was a Hebrew teacher. And so there was a lot of openness towards intellectual searching and academia and so on. At Stern, I was the beginning, I guess it was 30 years ago, of what became my lifelong journey in trying to find myself as a woman in rabbinic text. And I often tell my students I was a lot angrier 30 years ago. Being able to study Talmud and Halakha seriously has shaped me and has given me an opportunity to express some of my frustrations, some of my anger, but also to start creating some vehicle for change, meaning like being part of it, being able to teach young people, being part of Beit Hillel, becoming a Yoetz and Halacha. That was unthinkable 30, 40 years ago. And I feel that it's been a privilege, along with Rabbanit Dena and with many of my colleagues, to watch a generation of women emerge with fluency in Talmud and Halacha and start assuming leadership positions. And then the question, which we'll get to at some point, will be ordination, not ordination, rabbinic, sitting on a rabbinic court. I mean, those are questions that come up because of the last 30, 40 years of educational opportunities that didn't exist. So, now I teach at Torah Ba'avodah, I teach Fridays, as you've heard, and I'm reading a book on gender and halakha, and I guess I live these issues. I mean, this is my way of channeling and dealing with them.
Great. So thank you very much. So yeah, question one. Is Judaism sexist? And does Judaism make women feel that they are second-class citizens?
Who do you want to start with? You have to decide.
So I'm not a second class citizen. I feel alagova. You understand Hebrew though? Can I speak yours? So like in my community, like the roles are very clear, but like you won't find, I think where I live in Kiryat Sefer, I don't think you'll find any woman making kiddush. She has a choice, she's a single mom or something like that. Maybe, yeah, but you won't have an argument to if you make kiddush and I'll it's like we're not there, like it's not all there. But the last, I don't know, I think 20 or 30 years in the Haredi world, when men all started going to kollel, it was like after yeshiva, after you get married, you go to kollel. So the parnasa, the women had to actually work. So within the working world, the woman's role became, I don't want to say stronger, but like the women actually had to go into education, had to get degrees, had to like rise up in the working world, in the corporate world, or anywhere you are. And what actually happened in actuality is that the women are like at a much higher academic or I don't know professional level than their husbands. So usually it's okay because it's an agreement between them. But what you see, like if you come to where I live, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, who's taking the children home from Ghana? It's Abba, because Abba's finished with kollel at 1 o'clock. His children are finished with Ghana, 1 or 3 o'clock. And his wife is still at work because she's either a computer programmer or a teacher or an accountant or a business lady or a lawyer or whatever she is, or a nurse, I don't know, so she's not home. And then Abba comes home and gives the kids lunch and he takes care of the house. And on the way he puts in a load of laundry and, he does a little shopping. So what happened was like roles, without even knowing the word feminism, like if you come to my neighborhood, like ask the common person, feminism? She's like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, but that's what actually happens. Like if you bring a secular feminist or any feminist to where I live, they'll be like, oh wow, this is like gender equality because like the roles have been divided like unintentionally. So that's like I've been observing this for years, and I don't know if the men are so happy about it, but the women don't seem to mind because they're actually actualizing themselves within the system. Of course, there's a lot of issues of what you're allowed to learn, what you're not allowed to learn. There's ongoing debates whether you could go into medicine school or go into nursing school or I don't know or whatever. But some things are already agreed on. Over the years, more and more professions are being agreed upon by all the rabbis, and what's happening is that women are having master's degrees, women are lawyers, women are even going to medical school. So what you see, bashetach, how you say, is the feminine. Even though if you would ask any man in the street, like who's better, you or like they wouldn't even know what you're talking about. Like in shul, of course, there's some of our shuls hardly even have a women's section. I'm already skipping to your next question, which is like you would think, of course, the minyan is only for men. Like, yeah, the women, we have a little bit of something upstairs, but then maybe on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur they could come down. But it's like the religious roles are still very strong by the men, but the secular world is I don't know, probably much more than 50%. I would say even 75% and up, only occupied by women. So it's a very interesting mitzvot.
Is there a generational question that the younger generation of girls might look at that and say, we see a role for us in life and us that we want to have more in the religious world, like
I don't know. I don't hear it at all. And Gemara learning by us is like not a thing. Nobody even wants to learn Gemara by the way. I actually once gave a daf yomi shir, which was like really hard for me, and I loved it, but it's not like something we talk. It's like a small group of people that I know that do a daf yomi for women and assuming, but it's like a tiny group. It's not like something at all. But we do learn a lot of Torah. We learn a lot of Chumash, Tanakh, Machshevet, and stuff like that. The Gemara, that's not our location. Let them take care of it. I didn't hear voices like among the mainstream of women we would like to get into that world. It's a little bit chaval, I think, because it's just intellectually very exciting.
I'll jump in. I'm going to ask you something, and then I'll answer the question. I love talking to Liora about these things. You certainly are reflecting what I have been watching happen from the outside with this increased, education, women earning money, I remember something you said, I guess it was 3 years ago or 2 years ago, which is there are two things. We don't want to be poor, and we value Torah study. And like holding the balance between those two is very, very interesting. And I'm not saying that it's translating to Gemara and to Kiddush and to what we would call Orthodox feminism. I wonder, a few years ago, there were a group of Haredi women who were running for political office, and it was very controversial. And I remember in their interviews, they basically said the male rabbinic establishment is not representing us. So on one hand, they're not fighting for carrying a sacred Torah in shul. On the other hand, I wonder if there is more a sense that women want to have a voice and a say when it comes to the lives they're leading, whether again around divorce, around family planning, whatever it is. Do you see that at all becoming something?
I feel like in my role where I live now, so I'm in charge. I'm in the administration of girls' high school, and I consult the town's rabbi, who's considered very, very conservative, a lot, like on a weekly or twice-a-week basis. And I only feel respect, but I'm not coming from divorces and things like that. It could be that some people do have an opposition and maybe the rabbis don't represent it, but I feel that on the mainstream, the rabbis do listen to the women's needs. However, the rules are very clear. Like if I come to the towns and I say, listen, we want to start a Gemara class in my high school, who'll be like, what? Makarala. But I know it's like how can you say, like some people say, yeah, you're stuck in class. Like, why can't you learn Gemara? Why not? But like we also like know our place, like we don't try to fight, like we don't rebel. We're not rebelling against our system and our rabbis on a mainstream. And if you do rebel, like those women who ran for Knesset were considered rebels in our community, and they're out now. You don't see them because no one went with them, even the women, because we do mechabed the roles of the rabbis. So like we don't feel, I don't know, some people say, oh, we're so oppressed, but it's not true. Like we don't feel that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Max,
I have a question, like what you said, like you don't feel like blocked off in your community.
Sorry?
You don't feel like blocked off. You can't express yourself like.
I don't know. I'm here. I'm not
No. Let's say you want to learn some more
First of all, I can definitely don't stop me.
but people like.
I want to learn Gemara. I just take the Gemara, and if I don't understand it, I'll take the Shabbos and I'll open out. But I'm not going to go out in public and put it on the billboards of my city, which no one even ever heard of a woman giving a Gemara shir. And I would say, okay, now everyone come to the Gemara shir given by Rabbanit Nechama and Rabbanit Dena, and like come and I'm not. It's like it's too much. It's too controversial. Maybe in a few years. Like maybe that will be, but we don't want to. Also, we don't want to like. How do you say that?
Shake up.
We don't want to like shake up our men either. Like we don't want to say we hate you. We're not happy with you. You're understanding really good. Yeah.
So how do you learn your Jewish stuff?
We have a ton of Jewish stuff in school. Like most of the day is Kodesh. Like we have. Oh, it's not. Oh, I don't understand it. We like I said, we don't have the mark. We don't learn. We have halacha. We have a Shulchan Aruch, and we have Torah, Navi, Ketuvim, all the Mefarshim. Like I tell you, everybody, and like we're starting to do Bagut and Tanakh, and Jewish history, and the Gemara is something like actual Talmud. It's like the boys, the Lo Shalat. It's not Lo Shayach Lan. And we don't even go into the reasoning. Like used to when I was a kid, the Torah Karun is right. Like they don't even. I don't even hear my girls saying that. Like it's not off. It's not. It's not
just
on the table.
fascinating. They managed to create a gender divide where women are actually being actualized by being for the, like being educated at very high levels, earning more.
Right.
Men are in some ways 1950s housewives from 1 o'clock on, even though in the morning they're learning serious Torah.
Right.
And the religious piece has stayed intact, and I think it's because men and women have both accepted that, like they want to keep that gender divide very clear when it comes to religious space, and that's very interesting.
We'll do one more question and then we'll.
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious. I understand the logic and the separation in a religious context, but how would you respond to the critique that the pushback of women running for political office outside that realm and doesn't necessarily undermine the religious power of the rabbinical establishment, and yet they still were excommunicated for non-religious?
Yeah, because unfortunately in our world, religion and politics don't go together. It's like rabbis and the politicians are all like, it's like considered like one thing, which is totally not. Politics and religion by now totally different things, but in the Haredi world, they're not. They're connected. So like the Chavei Knesset are like sort of rabbis, you know, is that how? I mean, that's how we see it. Like they're like an authority figure, even though they're really not. They're politicians. I know some of them personally. I mean, they're nice guys. They're okay. They're stunning. They know what they're doing, but they're not rabbis. And the rabbis are not politicians. But for some reason, in our world, it goes together. It's like so a woman going into politics, it's like a woman say, I want to be the chief rabbi of the town. And like, no, we're not ready for that. It could be politics, maybe women. It could be the Haredi women will be able to go into politics. Maybe it could be there'll be laws that will force the Haredi parties to have women in it, and then the women have to be in there, which actually I'm a little bit excited about. Yeah, I must say. Like rabbis, okay, I don't mind, but politics, I think women have a lot to say. And I wouldn't mind if women would be in in politics. I don't see any kind of a controversy there. I mean, of course, it's me and everything, yeah, of course. But we might have women. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah, I think we're professional, and I think we could give a lot to our community in our network. But okay,
Well,
come on, it's not fine yet.
Okay, so the question is Judaism sexist? Does Judaism make women feel they're second classes as well? I would say that's an anachronistic term. In other words, to use the word sexist for a 3,000-year-old religion, you can't really match those two together. Do I think that there was a hierarchy that emerged in the interpretation of Torah and in the development of halakha? Yes, there is a hierarchy in which men and women are not equal. And the clearest example of this is a Mishnah, I think it's in Menachot, that says if you have to choose who to save, a man's life comes before a woman's. And the reason that is given there, men have more mitzvot and so on. But if I have to do triage, right, that the reality is men in many ways are valued more. They have more mitzvot to do, they count the dominion, they're more significant in terms of religious space. It doesn't mean that women aren't valued. It's very important for me to say. I think Rabbinic Judaism does a credible job in developing space for women as wife and mother, or even women as having mitzvah. Even that statement, women are exempt from mitzvah asesha man grama, right? They're hopefully all familiar with that. That creates a hierarchy by which women have less mitzvah than men. But if you actually count the mitzvah, it's like 8 or 9 mitzvah, depending on how you count them. In other words, women are re-included and re-obligated and many, many, many positive time-bound mitzvot. And so it seems like that statement, at least from my perspective and my analysis, only exists to create the binary, to create this differentiation between men and women, which is significant. And so on one hand, women have a lot of religious obligations. They have a lot of responsibilities, certainly as wife and mother, but there's no equality. And I wouldn't say the religion as a whole strives for equality. I mean, men and women have different roles. I'm not a big fan of different but equal. because I think I'd rather acknowledge the hierarchy, because there is an inequality, and I think that's part of what Orthodox feminism and what women who have been studying Gemara for 30 years have been pushing against, is that there is a hierarchy, and let's acknowledge it. And is it good or bad for women? I like something you said. You like your men. I mean, one of the things I often say when I lecture is I don't want to lose the men to gain the women. And the reality is, when we shift gender roles, often what ends up happening, and we've seen it sociologically in certain professions, is men leave the professions in which women start dominating. Right? When we look at law school and medical school, there are many, I think that at this point there are more women in medical school. There might be more women in law school, certainly in this country. And men have moved into high tech and and the hard sciences and computer sciences. And there's no question that gender plays a role in how we define ourselves. And so I think there has been this shift, this tension of, if women start moving into egalitarian space in Judaism, we may end up losing men, and that's what's happened in the Reform and the conservative movements, to be very honest. I mean, I teach in Pardes, we have rabbinical students from other denominations. More women show up for their minyanim, more women are in rabbinical school. And I can't ignore that. I mean, I recognize that having defined roles is important in terms of buying in identity, feeling that one is living a religious life. On the other hand, I'm also a very, I really, was the air, right? Like my body recoils when the slippery slope is invoked. Oh, let me do that, then the slippery slope. I think that's often a sloppy response to what we're afraid of. Let's acknowledge what we're afraid of, which is removing the gender binary from what has been a very traditional binary space. So I wouldn't use the word sexist. However, I think that in the last 100 years, as women in modern Orthodoxy, and this is where modern Orthodoxy differs perhaps from the Haredi community, the chasm is widening between what women are able to do in secular society and what happens when they come back to religious space. And women and some men are questioning the need for that kind of essentially inequality. Yeah, please.
Please, the question, the issue that we Orthodox, the school, they're dominated by not dominated by women or
LGBTQ.
Which as time has progressed and has happened, continues to happen because movements have basically organization. The question is there a nexus or kind of like how to play that out? Like, what implications there are language, that's happening. So is there something we're sacrificing for or not? I also might be but there's a issue there.
At what point do you, right, and the question is, at what point does the entire foundation begin to teeter when you remove too many traditional pieces, even if you can't articulate a clear defense of those pieces? And I think that's good. I will push back and say, I think the conservative movement has suffered. The reform movement actually has not, has been growing and has kind of become more vibrant than it's been in the past for a lot of reasons, because of the demographic, the non-Halachic Jews, and so on and so forth. But I think, again, someone outside of Orthodoxy would look at that statement as very almost condescending. Like, what do you think? There isn't vibrant Jewish community outside of Orthodoxy. So I want to be careful. I want to be. I don't think the non-Orthodox necessarily would agree with what you just said. The conservative movement is suffering and have lost numbers, but the reform movement and some of the outside of the denomination movements are actually gaining strength. Anyone, I will recommend a show called The New Jew. Anyone been watching it? Fantastic. You can find it on YouTube, where this Israeli actor, comedian, have you heard of it? It's really quite fantastic, showing you what Judaism looks like in America, right? And traveling around the country, and there's a lot of vibrancy and movement and so on, and it's really not Orthodox. And then the question is, what is Judaism? Who gets to be Jew? So, but I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm going to come back. What I most think about is, how many pieces can you shift without the foundation eroding? But I don't want that to become a slippery slope argument. And in other words, I think that's a deeper question than let's worry about one piece leading to another, even though they touch on that.
I'll just say short in terms of the question about Judaism sexist. I think that God is not sexist. I do think that some of the rabbis were, and like I'm okay with that. They also wrote some statements about science that we now know to be false, and I still keep their halakha and recognize, okay, you know, in the era when they lived, they just didn't know some of the science that we know. In the time that they lived, the whole world viewed men as better than women, and so they did too. I don't know, like, I don't say it doesn't bother me, but like it would bother me if I thought God was sexist, and I don't think God is sexist. Okay, so the rabbis looked at it and that was just the accepted norm, the same way as some of their science does. I don't know.
Okay, so let's move on to shul. So talking a little bit about shul, and if you like, you said that there weren't that many mitzvot that are different. The mitzvot, but shul played a huge part, kind of an oversight part in Jewish life. So is shul an inclusive place for women, and does it need to be? And if it does need to be more inclusive, then what are those changes?
I'm not honestly entirely sure what I think about it, in the sense that I do think it's important that women feel well encouraged to go to shul. At the same time, there is a certain like just reality that does come into play, that at a certain point, like, you know, couples will get married and they'll have young children, and it does, I think, again, could be that others will disagree, but I do think it makes more sense that the women who are the ones who are pregnant and then carry the child and are nursing and whatever, like, it does, like, I understand why that makes sense. Honestly, in my own life, like, that didn't play out. Like, I was the one who stayed home with the kids. So given that, like, I know I struggle a lot with the question where on the one hand, there's often communities that are pushing, you know, for like the women's side, for example, should be the exact same, you know, amount of space as the men's side. And I understand why people would push for that. And at the same time, when you come to shul on a Friday, on a Shabbos morning, and the men are all squished into the same space, and the 10 women who are there have the exact same, like, it just doesn't make sense. So I struggle a lot with that. Do you know what I'm saying? With on the one hand, like, it's hard to know which is the chicken or the egg. Like, maybe if we make the space and whatever, then maybe more will come. But I am not sure that that's the case, because ultimately, again, somebody needs to be more kids during that stage. So I'm not sure. I see both sides.
So my answers, I spoke a lot less, so my answer is very short. So it's no, yes, no, yeah. So it should be inclusive. It's not inclusive enough. Like, it's not inclusive now. It should be, and I would definitely make it inclusive. I know in the more modern communities, so the shuls are more like in flowers, but I know that the shuls, and I would like to bring the model of the flowers to Israel, to our Haredi communities, where there is a women's section on top of that. Some shuls don't even have one, and if they do, it's like tiny and like, yeah. I mean, there are, but for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, we all have room for sure. But it's not enough. It's not a place with, like you say, if there's babies, I know that in the States, like in some communities, there's a place for the women to come from 9 to 12, and they're there, and there's a place for the kids to play, and then join the Kiddush and for part of the community. We don't have that at all. My girls, like, they don't even know what shul is. Like, I've forced them to go on Shana, they daven in school, they daven at home. But I think it's like a big chapal for in our community that we're not part of shul like on a weekly basis. I know that some women, like, after the kids are grown up, they go to shul every week and there's that, but not enough. Mama speak. And I would love to make, I would love to see more inclusiveness of us in shul.
I think shul, and I'll say, shul is one of the last places, certainly in modern Orthodoxy, where there's a tremendous gender divide. And I'll talk a little bit about what I'd like to see change. But women are mechuyevet to daven, right? And so during the week, it's really not inclusive. The fact that on Shabbat, you're saying that your daughters don't go to shul, it's very sad to me, because there's more to shul. I mean, there's not just the davening and the shaliach tzibor and the kaddish and the kedusha, which obviously you can't do. There's the Torah. I mean, what gets me out of bed and gets me to shul is I learn the Torah. And there's a real connection in hearing the Torah in a different way than when you just read it to yourself if you read Parsha, right? There's something very alive about it. And so that saddens me that, on one hand we teach girls, and by the way, girls get married at 18, 19, there are all those years from the age that they are able, let's say 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, in the Haredi community, I think girls are very just, like can sit. They don't go to shul because their mothers aren't going to shul. But then why don't we have older teenagers sitting there? Like, why aren't we creating
Not in
spaces?
our culture.
It's not in culture, and I think we miss out. We miss out on something. And in addition, there's a communal aspect to shul. I said Kaddish for my mother for an entire year. I said it 3 times a day. If I was going to do it, I was going to do it the whole way. Thank you. It wasn't even on this effort. Thank you. And I remember during that year, it really, I'll say something about Kaddish, and anyone who said Kaddish will relate to this. It really helped me get through my morning. Meaning, like it was an amazing thing to have to get out of bed every morning and have to go to shul 3 times a day. Like it really did what you can't understand it until you have to do it. I hope you'll be much older when you have to do it, but at some point, everyone does it. It really does help you have a structure to your year in the morning. But there were times, most of the time, I was the only woman in the women's section. And I think what bothered me even more than that was that after shul, there's really an old boys club. Like they all clap each other on the shoulder and shake each other's hands and so on and so forth. And even though I knew these guys, it's in my community, no one said hello to me. Like there was no sense of after shul to say, hey, how are you doing? Like, where are you going? Like, it's almost like the exclusiveness is not just with the mechitza and shul. It translates to the behavior outside of shul with people that you know, as if like having a woman there, like you can't even talk to a woman during the week.
How did they make your Kaddish?
So I would say in my community, I have a lot of different experiences. I worked out with the Rav of my community that as long as a man was saying Kaddish, and there was a man there who was saying Kaddish every for the Shalah. He says it for the Shalah. So he made sure to say it loud enough and slow enough so that I could say it along with him. So that was my shul. Very infrequently, I had situations where it threw people a bit into a tizzy and they had to look for a man to say Kaddish with me. And once I was told it was Kol Isha, which to me was like, that was very sad. Because like hearing a woman's voice being heard in shul, even in prayer, is considered to be erva, right? But which to me that made me angry. Right, I said I've worked through a lot of my anger. That's one of the fact that women's voices can represent sexual stimulation for men in the course of prayer made me angry. But for the most part, people were very respectful and respected my commitment. And that, but you'd sit there and there'd be 8 men and me, and they'd have to start calling the teenage boys to show up. I will say, when that year ended, I stopped going to shul for almost a year. In a way, it was a wonderful experience and a very, very difficult experience as a woman because of those moments. The fact that here I was 3 times a day and I couldn't count. Here I was 3 times a day and I had to find a man to say Kaddish. And so that was not easy. So if we're talking about, synagogue, and when I think, yes, I think we absolutely must make sure, and this is where I'm turning to you, the young generation, make sure your college campuses are inclusive. Make sure that the mechitza is, I think a lot of colleges do it well, but the mechitza is something that the women can see and hear out of, right? And certainly when you grow up and go into communities, those are just basics that I think you can be partners in creating in your communities. I'd like there to be more awareness. If it's not a community where they want women to have a more active role in shul, then women certainly can give it Bar Torah after shul. I mean, there are a lot of things besides setting up Kiddush. I hear there are some British people here. I'll tell you a story about Britain. I don't know if I should mention the community. I won't. British. Any Brits here? Yeah, a number of them. So I was a scholar in residence in a community in London, and I went to shul. Now I'm going to actually, if you know the shul, you're going to retire. It was like this amazing mechitza where it was like one-way class. And I sat in the front row. I thought I was in the men's section. It was as if there was no barrier. It was actually a little disconcerting. It was so that the men couldn't see me because, of course, what they saw was like a white background. But first of all, I was like, wow, I'm sitting in the men's section, like, and no one seems to mind that I'm actually watching the men walk in front. Like, no one worries about what I'm being distracted by. But in addition, I felt very invisible because no one could see me. And what made me sad is it was a Shabbat where all the boys, it was a Shabbat totally run by boys between 13 and 17 or 18. It was a youth Shabbat. Boys did a fantastic job. Most of their mothers weren't there. And none of the girls their age were there. No one. And the girls were setting up the Kiddush afterwards, like they came after. And I thought that's an educational mistake. That is a real problem, that you tell the girls to come and set up Kiddush while the boys are davening and reading Torah. That chasm has to be narrowed. Yeah.
Can I have one more thing?
Yeah.
I think I'm really sad that we build a relation because it's like really bad shluchim. Because like I mean, people should see each other. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I have to, my girl wants to get married, and like, they don't even know. Like, they should see boys, and boys should. I mean, I'm not saying we should do anything bad. Like,
By the way,
it's
that's
like
a good thing.
It's a
Seeing
good thing to see
saying
each
I
other.
like that one. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not encouraging any bad behavior, but
No,
I'm
it's
saying
just to
like,
see each other.
it's like to know, who's in your community, and yeah.
So you mentioned that story. So
Yeah.
the question is, what can be done? Because at the end of the day, if women are not shaletiv or and they're not laying, then what is there that can be done? Maybe I'll start with you.
I mean, in other words, how to be encouraged the girls. Yeah.
How can we make it? Even things like mirot is a challenge. Even things like, and also bat mitzvahs, if you want to have like a boy aged 13 years old can lay a whole parsha, right? What can a girl do? What can you want to educate them?
No, it is fair. Like, say, for example, I know some communities, both in America and in Israel, where like they won't start the youth minyan unless there are 10 guys and 10 girls. So that even though halakhically the girls don't actually count, but like they give that statement of like, we want the girls to feel that they matter and that we won't start unless they come. But again, similar to what I said before about like the making the sign even, I'm not even sure what I think about that. Because on the one hand, I think it gives a very positive message of making them feel that they count. On the other hand, like halakhically they don't. So like we're actually like, it's hard for me to know, like, do I like the educational message? Do I feel like it's actually misleading? And especially in cases, which has certainly happened, where the early feedback, they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And I'm like, this is silly, just start. Like, they don't actually have to be here. Like, so it is very hard though to know what to do instead though to make the girls and the women feel that they matter religiously. That I think is so incredibly important. Like, I feel very lucky in that learning is like absolutely my avenue for connecting. And I feel very lucky that I was born at exactly the turning point where women began to have access to that. So that's why I guess I feel very lucky that I don't feel like stifled or held back, because the avenue that matters to me actually was open for me at exactly, I was born exactly the right time. But say for girls, like I'm talking about whatever, for a girl who say would express herself and wishes she could lean, and that would have been her way, it's very difficult. Again, for me, I feel like learning.
Yeah, you were there, but I can make sure that.
All of that. Speak up. Yeah, you also, maybe stand up to ask, because you're muffled between two rows of mics. So I know your turn.
You were saying about like you also have girls at home, and then you pick up your building. You don't go to or implement they go to shul, right?
They don't go to shul enough. We go on the Chadim. Is that what you're asking? Like, what do we do?
I mean,
What do I do? So I'm talking about myself. We hardly ever go to shul, unfortunately. I mean, Rosh Hashanah, Kippur, Sukkot, Torah, we're there. Sometimes there's Shavuos, but we dive in. Like, we know how to dive in because we learn in school, and we know everything. We know the brachos and we know the halachos, but we don't actually practice in shul. It's a huge big shame.
And you don't have the obligation or
No, we don't. Women are not.
no, different. You don't agree, right?
We pray at home. We pray at the kotel at home. Yeah. Whoa. And I know my girls daven more than I do. They daven mincha and shachar. They daven, but they don't hear kaddish. Some of them don't even know what to do in kedusha. And they're my girls are the shepherd girls. They're very fluent. Oh, they're ready to. Not my girls, but and it's a shame they don't even want to do to kedusha. I have to tell them and show them stand up, this is what you need to do, and it's embarrassing and it's hard for them. It's just such an amazing experience, and complaining and we should change this, whatever. They're not.
I would say in Friday night in Israel, if you've been to shul, hopefully you have, because now girls go to shul. Like girls are there's and that's interesting.
The Tilumi has a much better.
Tilumi has a much better Friday night, and like my teenage daughter who doesn't also like I have 4 daughters. They also don't like to go to shul, even though I go to shul. But they all went Friday night. They all like Friday night, and that's become a social norm, right? It's not because they have to be there, because they're excited about you light candles and everyone goes to shul, and that's succeeded here. And I don't know if there's a reason for it beyond the fact that women just went, and so Morning is much less. It's also much earlier, right? In America, more women go in the morning, but largely they get there. A lot of them get there later, and they get there for the youth groups and the children's groups and the kiddos. There's something very social and communal, and I think Friday night in Israel is where there's community. And by the way, a lot of singles meet right in the religious communities Friday night after davening, right? You're right, seeing someone holding a cleats on saying, can you look into him? That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And why?
Oh, no, go to yeah.
Are any of you would like?
Yeah, it's a free world. If you go to shul, the shuls there is a women's section of children who are welcome to go, but it's not a social place. Like kids are social, like teenagers are social. If their friends would go, they would go. And on Rosh Hashanah, everyone goes. So they go, they dress up, they buy clothes, everything, the whole thing. And it's like everyone goes to shul on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. But Shabbat, why should they go to shul? None of their friends are there. They could go. Shul is open. It's not a thing. So like the social thing brings religion. The social, like being in a community where everyone goes to shul, so it keeps you religious, keeps you loving shul or interested in the parsha. You know, like when I used to go a lot. My grandparents lived in a frat, so I used to go with them a lot to shul and Shabbos. It was really nice. Like I enjoyed it. Some people were bored, like when they would come to the pages and like when it's bounding over, like some kiddish, and like I'm in nurse, but that's okay. It's part of it. But they don't even have that. Like, they don't know what I'm nurse is. It's like Chabal, you know.
Well, even raise also just a point even for you to think about in terms of, I'm curious, like how say your family did it or what you'll do when these parents is something I really struggle with as a parent is, so do I now continue to like, perpetuate this dichotomy where like, say now I have a son who's about to be bar mitzvah and 2 teenage daughters. So I am very strongly encouraging him to go to shul Shabbos morning, but I let my girls sleep in. Like, why am I allowing that? But at the same time, I have to fight with them about sneeze, and I don't have to fight with him about that. So like maybe it's just like, I don't know, everybody's got their own battles. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna fight with him about 2 things, like bad enough one thing. So it's hard to know, but I'm saying even as a parent, it's very hard to know how to make those calls. I don't like that I'm perpetuating the inequality, but at the same time, I don't want to fight with them. So
How do you, anyways, these estimation will still more people
So I think
In shul.
in shul or around in the shul environment. So it's not necessarily the dominant itself.
First and foremost, I think that if it's an attractive space, it will be more attractive. Not only, but certainly that's a place to start. If the message is we cared enough about creating a women's section that has light and air and that you can hear and see in with a respectful mechitza, that we can, again, however you put it, then I think that will be helpful. I think also, certainly in Chutz La'aretz, where the services are longer, you could potentially invite women to give shiurim, right? Again, either to the congregation or to just the women, right? Something that creates some sort of space. Some shuls I know have a Rosh Chodesh, certainly in Chutz La'aretz, tefillah for women, right? Where the women lead the services and read the Torah, but separately. That's somewhat acceptable in mainstream Orthodoxy. Less acceptable is the partnership minyan, right, where men and women share some of the responsibilities of davening. So I think that certainly an attractive space and giving some sort of incentive. I like what you said about the 10 women counting, but you're right. If they don't show up, then what do you do? How long do you wait? It's so how do you get the women to recognize that they matter enough that if they don't show up, these 10 guys, the guys aren't going to be able to start, right? It's changing our whole culture. I think we're going to have to be creative educationally and communally moving forward. You're going to be part of that. You're totally
I don't want to change that.
okay.
I would like when it comes to shul.
Right. No, I'd say right. I'd say
I'm happy with
communally, we have to think about it.
my community working a little bit of
Not drastic. Right. So then the question is, how do you attract women to shul? So you're not sure. But that is a communal
and
question.
it's a communal question and it's spoken about.
Right.
Oh, like the leaders are saying the women should go to shul more.
So let me move on to maybe asking what do you think in the future will change? Because there have been changes in what women, for example, women's media readings are relatively accepted nowadays, pretty much accepted, many more than all. So are there other changes that are underfoot that you think in 30 years' time are just going to be normal?
I mean, it's clear. I mean, oh my gosh, things have changed dramatically, and just like my lifestyle, I'm not that old. Meaning, like again, even when I first started, like learning to marry myself, and even in my, the perfect, I think, whatever sort of story that captures it was I used to, like when I taught in my, and again, this is over a short time period, like even less than a decade. I would go to the open houses for, prospective like 8th grade students, and they would specifically ask me to go to, like, there was a yeshiva or whatever, there was a drop more to the right, and so they were just beginning to send students to us. And they would always ask me to please make sure to be there at the open house for that high school parent, so that when they would ask about girls learning Gemara, I should field the question. Like over just my short tenure there, I think I was there 8 years, by the end, none of the parents were even asking about girls learning Gemara. Like that was just, even I'm saying, like, obviously it's, relative how I didn't get it if they were considering mine, but even though like yeshivish elementary school, that was like, oh, of course they can learn Gemara. All the questions, what do you think all the questions were about? Yeah, all of them were about this. I can say 100%, but like 90% of the questions were about these, but like they weren't even asking any. Point being, like that battle, like was, I don't know, 1-1, or even just, I don't know, just happened. Like so, exactly. So learning, I feel like has already like been totally accepted. I think the next thing which is happening, if you guys all saw the news just now, the first like Orthodox female rabbi, where she's the lone rabbi, as opposed to like serving together with a man, was just appointed in the class, like in the Tamar neighborhood. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. So I told we're literally like living history that is whatever, So again, the women learning Gemara already, I feel like has made such tremendous strides. I think that's clearly the next thing.
Can I have a question? How are the men in the shul accepted women?
So this just happened. The community, they voted on it, and apparently I think it was, what was it? It was like 80% were in favor, or 84% were in favor of the men and women. It was a vote. I think, Liora, what I would answer is that if men are, meaning in communities in which men work for women or with women, then the idea of a female rabbi, as jarring as it sounds, it's not going to be as difficult if already you recognize that a woman can be my professor, and a woman can be my supervisor, and a woman can be my boss. And then having a woman as a rabbi is not as big of a deal, is all I'm saying. Meaning, like, and so I think, when I talked about the chasm, right, in modern Orthodoxy, the fact that we go into shuls that are very gender-based, right, some women are passive and women don't count, and then we go out into the world, right, and women are doctors and lawyers, and that's happening by you, which is why it's interesting that women are, like, the change is not religious, but the men should have that, right? So in modern Orthodoxy, I think that the question of who's a rabbi is the question. And the answer, this woman meets all the needs we're looking for in the community, and we're not going to focus on the gender. It is huge.
I don't think it's ever going to happen.
No, it's never.
We don't want that. Right. We're like, we're good with the men being rabbis. Like I said, we want the men to lead.
Right.
We want, like, we're interested in it. If we're happy with where we are, we're leaders also. We're leaders.
Because you've been given it. Right.
Like that, so we want the men to lead. Like,
well,
I don't think that's going to change.
And you're saying,
I don't think it's going to change right now.
I personally don't want it.
Right. I understand that.
Yeah. Was that so Shira learns in the Lindenbaum Baby Draft. So I actually was just asking her this week, whoa, like how did that happen? And or whatever. She said she's been doing it. I think the best way for these things to happen. She's basically been doing it unofficially for I think 3 years when she moved in, meaning like she was just the person, meaning the shul didn't have a rabbi. She was the person who, when they had it sort of was like rotating who would give the drasha each Shabbos or whatever. When they didn't have anybody, she was just the one that they like. She was like the go-to person. And when they had a halakha question about I don't know whatever it is that would come up about what the shul policy would be like, not because she was voted or whatever, she just was the person. I think it's fantastic. I think exactly, it's completely organic. She just is a huge Talmidat Chachama. She was the one they asked, and then at a certain point, the vote wasn't should it be her or somebody else. It was should we just acknowledge that she is the one who we're going to, and therefore we should actually give her the title and the recognition as I used to say her, or just keep sort of it going unrecognized. But she was already doing it. I think that's yeah. I think yeah.
So do you think one of the questions we have is there a glass ceiling for women in Judaism, leadership roles? Maybe, and I guess since the last time we asked this question, like a ceiling can be broken because it seems like it's the first one in the world. So
no, not
Is it soul? Is it soul?
You're saying it's the soul?
So okay, so can where is it going to go? Is this going to be the norm? Can this mean possibly, for example, where we've already seen mashkikot in Zohar, which is also
yeah. So does that make sense?
Yeah,
Right, once you get there.
Rabbanit does mashkikot.
Yes, yeah.
Regular Rabbanit. Not
The regular Rabbanit was
I
forced
think
to,
they-
they actually
Regular
went to the
Rabbanit has
Barash.
mashkikot.
I don't think they
It's
actually
going
had,
on for a while.
yeah, but they're more resistant, I think, so.
I actually thought bad. I think in our paper that they're looking for mashkikot.
You can imagine, especially if a woman runs a catering business and
Yeah,
has to have a female mashgicha. It used to be this concern that since men did a lot of the restaurants, catering and so on, having a woman come into the kitchen of all men was, like it's new piece. But now we have women running businesses and it makes sense for everyone else. Is there a glass ceiling? I mean, there is right now, but should there be? Yeah. I don't think women being rabbis is that, I mean, on the face of it, it's very political, right? It's about, again, taking a title that for thousands of years has belonged to men. But in practice, what you're describing is something women have started doing already for several decades, which is answering halachic questions and teaching part shiurim. And then do we acknowledge that professionally, right? Should women then get paid for that if they're already filling that role? And if you read the RCA, the OU's Tshuva, sorry, the OU's without a Tshuva, they kept coming back to Masorah. It's not Masorah. Like, they didn't really have a clearly articulated attack on women becoming rabbis. Masorah, it's not Masorah, women aren't rabbis. But if we use that lens, a lot of things today aren't Masorah. I mean, a lot of the way in which we function religiously, including in the Haredi, Masorah, technology has changed things, right? If it was Masorah, we should be sitting in the dark and eating cold food. Right? In other words, electricity is not Masorah. I mean, using Masorah very specifically without seeing how enormously, how enormous the world has changed, even as holding on to traditional structure. I mean, that's perhaps what the best and the most amazing thing is. I think it's a bit of a misnomer. So I don't think there needs to be a glass ceiling. When you say post-scam, what do you think the Yoatzim Halacha do? I mean, what do you think women who are finishing Linda Mount's program do? I have a friend who answers questions in Kashrut, Shabbat, and Nida very competently. There are women who are very trained in fertility law already, women trained in divorce law. So I don't think, now, at this point, there are no women who reach the level of Torah that, let's use the Rav Ovadia, Rav Moshe. I mean, you don't have women, but who have reached that level of Torah. I think that touches on something that's asked later. But if Ruth Bader Ginsburg could become a Supreme Court justice, then women can reach, I mean, intellectually, the levels of brilliance, right? Again, how many Ruth Bader Ginsburgs are there on the big fan? Right? But she broke all the glass ceilings, and then what did she do? And this is something I think I'd like to pose to my two comments. She started making gender an issue in the Supreme Court. Until then, the male justices didn't care enough to begin looking at how much discrimination there was around women, and she changed the law by being a woman who said, wait a minute, we need to acknowledge how much this is hurting women and men. I think her first case was actually about, this is insane, basing this on the movie, so I don't know if this was the first case. But one of the cases she took was a man who was a caregiver for his mother, and because he was a man and not a woman, he was not entitled to the benefits that a woman who would take care of her mother would be entitled to. And he was drowning because he couldn't handle a job and being a caregiver. And she fought for the reverse discrimination, right? She said, that's also discrimination, that we genderize, right? The fact that only women are caretakers for their parents and for their children, and only women can be compensated. And she said, we have to break that. And I think we would all agree that's a good thing, right? And today we do see men who are caretakers for their parents and for their children in the Haredi community as well as the Orthodox community, and are very happy that the law recognizes that it's not gender-based, but often situational. What happens in a family where there's no wife, right? Men should be recognized as single parents with the compensation that single mothers traditionally got according to the law. There are single fathers who need that kind of support. And so I think having women reach levels of psak halacha that are, go higher and higher in halakhic conversation. I heard a woman who works in the rabbinic court say the dayanim themselves said to her, "We're happy to have your voice because you are expressing something that we wouldn't be able to get at." I've heard Rav Hopkins has said that to me as a yoetz and halakha. This is why we need women, because you are able to more clearly articulate what the women are asking than we perhaps can even modestly ask, right? And so I do want to say that I think women, it's not just about power and control and fighting to be equal. I think it's also about the sensitivity and some of the differences that having women's voices. Speaker.
So I want to.
Oh, it's gonna have to surf, but it's not surf.
How do you
like
what do you want to do? I want to go out of this. Like,
move away, move it
No, I
separately.
want to yeah, I want to broaden a little bit.
Zoom out,
A little bit of the religious women glass feeling, because I want to go into like the working world, which I've been in for many years, and like just kind of looking at it and seeing that the glass ceiling, what we're talking about in the religious world is a reflection of what's going on in the general world. I'm sure you've had the discussion today with the panel maybe about just feminism in the world, not talking about Jewish or religious, just women in the world. And I see that there definitely is a huge glass ceiling for women in the world, unfortunately. And look, 100 years ago, where the women were suffragettes, the Mary Coffins, where they were fighting and shackles and fighting for their. What was it? How does it go? Cast off the shackles. Yes, cast off the shackles. Years ago, they started the seed of actually having equal rights, the right to vote. And from that, we're here. We're working and we're educated and we have rights and we have if the woman is beaten, she could go to court and have she has her rights, a lot more rights than she did. However, from totally being equal, the world is not there. Like if you go to, I'm talking about working places now. Like if you go to corporate or to any place called school, let's say, or I think in the Bekei Mishpat, in the courts of law, women have more power. The Supreme Court in Israel, I think a lot of the judges are women, 150% even, and in the law world. But if you go to the corporate world, the bosses are men, and the women are working for them. And if you want a coffee, so who's bringing the coffee to the boss? It's not a man, it's a woman. Why? Why is the woman the secretary and the man the boss? And that's the case in a lot of corporates and most of the offices and there is definitely glass ceiling, and I see the way men, I should say maybe older men from maybe the previous generation, they really do look at women as, I'm not talking about religious stuff, I'm talking about men in general. And every organization you look at, that I looked at anyway, not like I'm so experienced in everything in the world, but that's the way it is. And it shocked me a few times. I thought, okay, we're religious, we're Haredi, so of course. But I saw it by not religious people at all, by not Jewish people at all, that it's expected that you don't make the coffee, serve, clean up, or whatever. You could be very highly educated, but that's what's expected of you. I'm not saying every university is more, but if you look at the actual corporate world, that's the way it is. And it's even weird because, to me it was a shock. I was shocked because I said, what happened? Didn't the world go forward? And it didn't. In some ways, it didn't. It's still expected of women. I've seen men speaking to women in a way that's they didn't even mean disrespect, but it's condescending. It's of course, I'm the boss, and you don't work. I'm not going to do anything to, humiliate you. But the whole concept is the women are here. The man is the boss. Even like the Rosh Menshalah. Since Goldman mayor, we didn't have a woman Rosh Menshalah, and there's plenty of very capable. What?
How many years have we had the same Rosh Menshalah?
That's right. What about America? You didn't have a woman president yet, you at least had one. But it's the world is like that. And you guys are young, but when you grow up, you just be more sensitive.
Can I push it a little bit and ask about, you kind of articulated it in the community that there is respect, especially, so maybe not all generations so much, there is respect to different roles. Do you think that's indicative of the whole Haredi community in Israel, or do you think there are different, where you live is maybe a bit more aggressive than other Haredi communities?
I think the men are very respectful of women. They're very respectful of women in general. I mean, of course, I think about that, but in general, they're very respectful and they're very, they keep their kavod and everything. But the roles are pretty clear, I think. Like if you talked about the Knesset, you asked one of you asked about the Knesset. Why aren't there any women in the Knesset? There are women, but they're not Chavrei Knesset. They're the secretaries and they're the paralegals or whatever. I think we present like a reflection of what's going on in the world. It's maybe more harif in the religious world, even in your religious world that are more open. It might be more harif, but it's not like so different from what's going on. Maybe a little bit stronger, maybe a little more obvious. It's not much different from what's going on in the world. When you guys grow up and you go into the working world, you'll see it. And like if you're more sensitive, so so I think there is a glass ceiling. Ideally, there should. I don't know if there shouldn't be or should be. I don't know, but there is one. I in the religious world for sure, and also I see in the working world. I have like a funny story. When I was working in one of my organizations, so there was like it was like a school organization. So all the principals of schools were women, Haredi women. And there was like some kind of a big party or something in a big hall, and there was a lot of girls there. But there was like a shulchan kavod, the main table where everyone sits, and there were no men there. There was like a couple of men. So they asked the photographer to sit at the main table. Like the photographer, just because he was a man, he was like he had to sit at the head table. And the women there were much more accomplished than any one of those men up there. But it's like a glass, and the woman doesn't sit up on the head table. I don't know if that would change or not, but that's the thought. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
First of all, some people have been texting me, but they're watching on Zoom, but they can't hear the students' questions.
Oh.
So there's been some big
Okay, that's a
questions.
good idea. Okay.
And this question for you, so that the women are normally the breadwinners of the family.
Right.
So does that have a role between the master of the house and the comes to issues?
So wait, let me just repeat the question. That women are the breadwinners, but does that create an issue for the master of the house when issues arrive? How do they get resolved? If there's
Look, I feel that if there's a good relationship, it's a good marriage, and if it's a real partnership, so it should be a discussion. There should be a good relationship between any couple, any married couple, because even a couple that's not grown, the woman is expected to come home at 4 o'clock to fetch the kids, and the man is expected to stay work till 8 o'clock at night. Of course, like why is he going to come home before her? That's like, just expected. But in our world, like so the beginning of the discussion, that like the opposite, the Abba comes and picks up the kids from school. But it could be an issue. It could be an issue. Definitely, they talk about it. They do talk about it. The woman is like a high tech, program coder, and she's she has a really high position. She makes a lot of money, and she drives a fancy car, and she has to dress up. And the husband's like a never colo guy, and like she comes home and she's like making all these huge multi-million-dollar decisions at work, and like she's or signing huge contracts, and then he comes home and he's like, I don't know, he's like, why didn't you wash the dishes? I don't know, or something like that. She'll be like so annoyed, like, why are you like bothering me with these little things? Or she'll be like, I just bought, I don't know, something I bought a new couch. He's like, why didn't you ask me? He's like, why did I ask? Like it has to be a partnership, and there is a gap. There is a chasm between. It could be, and it's discussed. So it's discussed like in the media and the Haredi newspapers. So it means it's happening. But I don't think it's on such a great level. It could definitely happen. I think girls and boys, when they get married, especially if the husband's going to go to pole and the woman's going to go into having a career or into working, it should be discussed and it should be prepared for it. And I think in a good relationship, everything should be worked out. But they're definitely the trigger could be there. Like it's definitely a difference between I've had it myself. I'll be honest with you. I was like this career woman, and my husband was the housewife, and he was upset. He was annoyed. He was like, I'm mad. My neighbor doesn't throw the garbage. She doesn't throw the garbage. I'm doing everything in the house. And there was a time that we had to work it out. It was an issue. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm bringing in so much money and I'm working and I'm schlepping and I'm doing everything. And also keeping the coal ideal is very hard after a few years. Like for the first 2 years, it's great. But if you really want to keep up the coal of life, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And either you totally believe in it. And if you do, so the woman is already with the man. The man is the head of the house. And I'm just bringing the front house up. Work is work, home is home. But if there's a little bit of a culture difference, so it could be a big issue. But I think couples should be. Look, marriage is not easy nowadays in any community, in any religion. Unfortunately, our community has much more divorces than it used to. I personally hear about people around me that are, either getting engaged and breaking it off much more often than used to. Very young couples getting divorced. I think it is. We're living in a tough world, and a good solid marriage is not doesn't come for granted. You have to work on it.
So I just want to piggyback on something you said, and I didn't want to join in. I like the word partnership, and when I go and talk on college campuses, I often ask my students, does gender matter? Where does it matter for you? And I'm assuming all of your mothers have college degrees, and many of them have second degrees, and some of your grandmothers already have college degrees, right? And so that means what you're describing is the tension that happens when women leave the home to work. And right, this idea that it's not automatically the mother is picking up and the mother is doing this and the woman is doing this, but there have to be partnerships. If you end up becoming doctors and marrying a doctor, which often you need in medical school or in law school, you're already going to have homes that are about partnerships and making room. And if one of you becomes a rabbi or a teacher and you marry a doctor who becomes the head of her department, right? That's very possible today, but each person has to make the other feel. It's not about how much money you make and the honor you have outside of the home. In the home, really being thoughtful about partnerships, and that's a lifelong investment. And divorce, I think, is on the rise because I'm going to use the word. I think women don't want it. And they don't want to be married to feel disrespected, and they don't want to feel like they're being, and men as well. I mean, it's going in both directions, now men as well. And I think people are expecting more and more from their marriage than my grandparents certainly did. In other words, they want to have spiritual connection and physical connection and emotional connection and financial security. They want all of that in this one relationship, and that really in the first year, and the first year, right? And if they don't, that there's a lot, they're not willing to necessarily stay committed to it. And I think we need to do a lot of work beforehand and during to help people stay in it.
I think the generation in general. I'm sorry to interrupt that. I think like our whole generation, like in the Jewish world, I don't know what's still going on in the Jewish world. I haven't been there, but. Like, I think technology is really changing us. Like I see, all of you have phones and talk about that you haven't been in them for like the last hour and a half. One's in the back. I'm married.
We're assuming.
We're watching you, but it's okay because we also want to like look at our.
I know. I'm getting more.
Like they have it, I have it, but like between us, like technology is changing. It's not the same. But like we have instant gratification for messages. Like just a WhatsApp message gives you like, they're like
triggers your brain.
Triggers your brain. It's like dopamine. Like get excited and like I'm talking about myself, and I have like a totally kosher smartphone. I don't even have internet, but I'm like, okay, how many WhatsApps did I get? Oh, I didn't get one. Oh, I'm so heavy, and in a group and like, oh, I have to meet every group and every status, like every person, and then I'm bored, so I take my husband, so I look at all of his statuses. And there's this one guy that puts on like interesting, these like interesting short movies, like interesting status. I'm like waiting for it. Come on, why don't you put it on? Like once you put it on, I'm like, oh, so annoying. Why did you put it on the interesting? Like it really gives us like it's our life. It's sad, it's scary, but I think it has to do also a lot with relationships. I just heard a funny story. I don't know if it's funny or sad, but about this couple that just got married. They got him like a horse and a buggy to take them, I don't know, for the chuppah or whatever it was. And as they got into the horse and buggy, they both pulled out their phones and they're starting to like
Instagram, text.
Yeah, it's like our lives are on our phones, and like our relationships are on our phones. And my husband told me it takes he was like, he told me for I don't know, to go somewhere in his car. And like he said, okay, I'm so excited. I'm taking 4 of my guys, and we're gonna start choosing. We'll have all this. He's like, it's no one's like on their phone. He's like, why are you guys talking like what? Oh, maybe we're not interested. We're like, we're on our phone. They're talking to each other on the phone. So like, that's what's going on. I'm there, and I'm like old, you know. So like, you guys, you were born with the phones in your hands, and you know, the young generation, like the relationships are fragile because like you can't replace face-to-face communication. Like if you guys, like Baruch Hashem, we have Shabbos, so we put our phones aside and we're on our phones, hopefully most of us. But I'm saying like we have one day a week that we can't be on our phones, so we have to sit together and face each other. But technology is really, you know, risking all of things that we knew before: marriages, friendships, social things, emotional health. You know, so like it's not like okay, get married, great. Oh, good, I'll work, you know, I'll go to college, we'll do this. It's different. It's like, I think our generation don't even know what you guys are like, what you're challenging, like what your lives are even. We don't even know because what we have is even like a fraction of what your generation had. So you guys, you know, I'm cheering for you that, you know, you'll have great marriages and great parents. But you guys have the technology that, you know, we didn't have as kids and as young parents.
So after Dena, we're going to take the last round of questions. Respond to anything.
Let's go free for all.
I don't know.
We got to the glass ceiling, we got to that, we got to talk about partnerships and
Well, I guess one thing that is on here,
Yeah,
whatever.
because we're not going to just talk about the gender roles because we haven't so much time.
Yeah, fine, so I'll mention that, which ties in with some things that we were saying. It's like one of the questions on here, which could be that we won't have a chance to get to, but it talks about, it's about the gender roles. It specifically here was written, how do you do gender roles inside the home with regard to work, looking after children, and religious roles, who makes kiddush and candles, which has been something very interesting for us because, as I mentioned at the beginning, I was divorced for a whole bunch of years, so then of course I made kiddush and everything, because like I was the only parent there. And what's been very interesting is, again, so I just got remarried this past summer, and I wasn't actually sure like what would happen. You know, like, I mean, growing up, my father was always the one who made kiddush and hamotzi, and you know, even when I was married the first time, like he always made kiddush and hamotzi, and I wasn't even sure what I myself wanted or felt. Part of me was like, I kind of want the like classic traditional thing, and part of me was like, I've gotten used to doing it and it's very meaningful to me, and I'm not sure I want to stop. I really wasn't sure. Anyway, what was so interesting to me was that my husband totally assumed that, of course, I was going to still like continue to do it. At least the irony is that I probably even make kiddush more often than him because he does a keto diet, whatever. He doesn't eat carbs or sugars, so he doesn't like to drink wine if he doesn't have to. So I actually make kiddush even when it's all of our kids and even his like teenage boys and whatever it is. Like I actually make kiddush more often. So and lighting candles, it's like just interesting the way, you know, and for different. But like what was so interesting to me was that it was almost like I had bought all these things and do I want, do I not, whatever. To him, it was just like, of course you will, and like please do. Like it was very interesting. Yeah, and even in terms of lighting candles, we actually both light. Like I like you know, my kids and he likes his kids, we like together. So it's just interesting. But yes, that's what I was going to say. So interesting. Actually, a very interesting thing that's not even about halacha, but again, I was so struck by it. Like I even just kind of assumed that like he would sit at the head of the table. But again, that's even nothing to do with halacha. It reflects again in a certain sense. Exactly. And I just totally assumed he would. And he was like, of course not. Like we actually still have, like I still have my house in Efrat and he has his in Beit Shemesh, and we go back and forth between the two. But when we're in Efrat, which is like even a little bit more than half the time, he's just like, of course you're still gonna sit there. Like that's your chair. I'm not taking your chair. So I actually even sit at the head of the chair. It's like, but what's so interesting is if you had asked me, I don't even know what I would have said I wanted. I think I just even assumed he would sit at the head. But like I don't know, it's just interesting seeing like how things evolve.
Reflects the fluidity of these partnerships that we create in our lives sometimes. That, you know, someone's single for 10 years, both men and women, and they've been lighting candles and women's been making finish. This idea now we're coming together and it's not automatic. That never happened. In the traditional model, people got married very young, straight from their parents' home. And today, I think even in the Haredi community, people are getting married older, right, for a lot of reasons. And then in the modern Orthodox world, you go off and live on your own. You share apartments with guys and girls with girls, and sometimes even your own apartment. And it's interesting that when you create families, suddenly there are more questions about what it's going to look like.
Okay, so Yeah, we're gonna any opportunities to ask questions. We're gonna have any questions that you ask. I'm not gonna answer them yet, and then you can choose which ones you want to respond to. So Jacob, then Avi.
So often with regards to the question about women in Judaism, I hear tension between a desire to give women a larger role where it's possible, and also a desire not to move too fast, they change too fast. So if the new frontier is going to be, let's say, women making kiddush, what's our personal responsibility for that our community? And do we wait until like change becomes commonplace, or do we initiate the change?
Okay, so the first question, Avi. Thanks.
So we talked a lot about gender roles in culturally, but then also, you know, the halakha might reflect as well, also certain designation of roles for men. Do you think the halakha is acting in a descriptive or prescriptive way? Is the halakha saying that it's an ideal that there should be a separation of roles, or is it something which is it just reflects the time at which the people develop halakha, you know, and also the times when people
Any last questions?
We're not judging anyone.
Okay, so I'll ask if you we'll just take one person each ask a question, answer each question, and then we'll have final thoughts. So I'd like to go first. We'll read the questions. Okay, someone asked it. Is halakha prescriptive or descriptive?
I think there are elements of both. Meaning I use that language, so it's interesting in the book that I'm writing that it's not proscriptive but descriptive. So I appreciate your reflecting that. Yeah, I think there are elements of both. I don't think you can say that halakha is not, first of all, uniform. There's different countries and different times and timing. You know, halakha has a fluidity to it and a nuance to it. But I think I would say both.
I think I also would say that, I guess, but also some of what I often wonder is like what, and I think this is where things will change, is what things are hard and fast halakha and what's not. Meaning, like 100 years ago, I think everybody would have assumed that it's hard and fast halakha, that it's us for women to learn Gemara. I think people would have assumed it's hard and fast halakha, that women can't be a rabbi, like things like that. So I guess, so to whatever degree things are actually hard and fast halachot, I actually think there probably is something prescriptive about it, like that's sort of the expression of what is meant to be. I guess where I question is, you know, how many of the things that we assume are hard and fast halacha maybe actually aren't, because again, there's all these things that 100 years ago people assumed were, and then actually it turns out that, you know, that's not actually clear that way. So I guess that's just what I wonder, is which things that we kind of are assuming maybe 50 years from now they'll be like, oh, it totally doesn't have to be that way.
Someone take Jacob's question.
Yeah, good question. I would say as follows. The question is responsibility for change. Who does that fall on? And you mentioned a woman reading a ketubah or maybe kiddush. So I would say, look, I've read a ketubah at a few weddings, usually brides that I've taught, students of mine who have a close connection to me. Again, it's not really a halachic question. It's women did. No one's asking you to be paid at the wedding. A question of women reading ketubah, or women saying sheva brachot either under the chuppah or at the end of the meal, is really reflecting couples saying, wait a minute, we're getting married, and this ceremony is very, very passive for the woman, and we really want, I mean, that's what I find couples are doing. We want areas, and where are there halachic restrictions? Where is it proscriptive and where is it descriptive? And how can we have a ceremony that reflects our own partnership, right? Where we're not creating a hierarchy, right? The man says, Hariyam Kudeshali, but the woman's not going to say it back, but I've had a lot of questions about when can a woman give a ring at the ceremony? That's become very, very big in modern Orthodoxy. I want my Rabbanit to read the ketubah because I don't want all these rabbis coming. I want my grandmother to come up with my grandfather. And I think that's grassroots. I mean, that's really coming from more learned and maybe more educated populations who are aware of the descriptive versus prescriptive and who are asking questions. You know, I find it puzzling that on college campuses, most of them, not starting NYU, I don't even have this issue, but I've been at Harvard, and I've been at Maryland, I've been to a lot of college campuses. They don't want to pass the woman a Sefer Torah. Why not? Meaning that's not a halachic issue. There's a taboo there that, oh, that would look like we're allowing women to read Torah maybe. It's more of a social structure. It's not a halachic question. Or women making kiddush at JLIC Friday night. Well, why not allow a woman? Kol isha maybe with let women make hamotzi, right? If you don't want women singing the kiddush. But again, that can come from you, your communities, working with the JLIC rabbi, whoever the rabbi is, and saying we want more of a partnership in these spaces. I don't think it's going to come top down. I really do think some of these are going to be coming from the communities that begin to say, where can we halachically do this without, and because it's important to us to have more balance in the way religious space works. That's what I would say.
Okay, I'm going to ask, just, we haven't got so much time, so just a minute and a half. The original question we had is, what will the role of women look like in 10 years' time? But feel free to also, instead of just a reflection on the session as well, some closing thoughts from each of you, and then we'll break them up. Is this on Russian? No.
You know, I had that book, and then one of my classes in university, nothing to do with religion, so I was talking about minority roles, and person said, he said, you know, I gave a whole lecture, we had a whole session about gender and men and women, and then when it was over, so the women went to the kitchen to prepare the food, and the men stayed in shul, like what were we doing? So, anyways, I'm kidding about it, but okay, I think in 10 years, I think it won't definitely change, definitely not start from the creative world, but I think it will sink into it, and you know, there's nothing wrong with it. If you keep it smooth and you keep halacha, it's like the shock, you know, the shock when you hear the woman reading the ksubas, you're like, oh, it's terrible, when's coming to an end? Okay, you know, when you get used to it, it's okay. Look around, it was said there. If you know, it's like a change, like you said, who initiates the change? Do we wait for it to happen? Do we do it? So a change, if you have omet, if you're a meat, and if you have you're not afraid to fall, so you make the change, you know, just like it's terrifying because you're afraid your world is crumbling in, like, oh, no one's gonna religion, we're all gonna be goyim, we're all gonna, you know, your grandchildren are gonna not Jewish, etc. So like I think the Haredi world will not initiate the change, but I think change will definitely seep into the Haredi world in 10 years. And you know, I'm just hoping that the community will stay strong as it is. You know, I don't want to see it personally. I don't want to see, you know, but I definitely don't want to see the Haredi community crumbling out or people like becoming not Haredi. Like I want to keep a Haredi community. I do think there's changes to make, and there will happen. Things will happen. They're now. Like how am I what I am if it didn't come in from the world? Like it wouldn't happen. So and a lot of my neighbors and friends, you know, and you guys will do it probably, and it will seep into us. So thanks. And it'll be good. It will be great. Like I'm sure it'll be good. And you just have to like balance between. You say it in Hebrew. It's very good. Shinoi and the shimur. Shinoi and shimur. Like change. Change. It's much better in Hebrew. Like change. Preserving like what you have, the good things that you have, the good qualities.
I would say personal answer to the question that like should you feel a responsibility to change it. I think a lot is kind of like personality. Like there are just like personalities who want and feel that they want to make these changes, whether it's, you know, small things in the context of their own home with their children and their friends who come for Shabbos will see if it's a, you know, woman making kiddush or whatever it is. But for other people who you're not, I wouldn't say you all need to walk out of here and feel that it's your afraid to like start doing that. If you're
Why not?
yeah, I don't know. I
feel like you said personality. Some people
but hesitate for those of you who want to go ahead. I'm saying I don't think I need to tell you guys you must do that and you have to only marry a woman who's going to do that. Or whatever.
If you feel excited about it and it's the right thing, and you're go-getters and fighters and leaders, and you'll fall on the way, and people will object to you, and you'll have people talking against you, and not everyone will believe in the same thing and what you're doing. But go for it, that's how the world's becoming a better place. I think.
Yes, but I was gonna say, but for those who like, that's not their personality or whatever it is, right? Exactly. In terms of what I think it's gonna look like, I think it's almost hard to predict because whoever would have guessed, again, even 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, that things would look the way that they do now. That's only say, even less than 10 years from now. So I definitely think that there will be more shuls that have women, whether as the sole leader or part of it, because I guess one thing even in this actually I didn't want to like you're saying that in your community there's so much advancement, it's so fantastic of like women having the opportunity to express themselves in all these secular professions. And like one of the things that I'm so happy about in our world is I almost feel like all these women who are so talented are only getting to express their talents and express them by being, I know, like, oh my gosh, like, you are doing it in sort of.
But we're doing it in the girls' world, like in school, everyone's getting Torah information, the women are teaching, the women are giving over Yiddishkeit. Where do the girls get the Yiddishkeit, the Masoros from the women get it down from women, and we have a couple of rabbis who mostly women.
But I feel like that now we're getting another 50%. We're like doubling the amount of Jews that are potential leaders and Talmidei Chachamim and whatever it is. I just feel like I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I think women, I think are going to contribute a ton now that the opportunities are. I think the women will have a chance to express themselves, but I think it will be amazing for the Jewish community to have now double the talent pool available.
Okay, I don't have a lot to add. I've said a lot, but I would say the role of women. It's going to evolve. I hope it will be towards more respect, more consideration, more sensitivity. I hope that workspaces. I would say as follows. I think the mistake in corporate and a lot of the places is to use a male model for what we expect. We want women to be like men in order to succeed. I would really love it if the world recognized there's value, the male world, the corporate world, the world at large, there's value like in the religious world to women having children, getting married and having children, so that in a professional track, some allowances are made to show that we value that. And then women would be able to go further, even if they, taking off 2 years wouldn't be seen as a negative, but would be encouraged. And by the way, in the Netherlands, that's what they're doing. Women don't pay a price at all for having children. They're allowed 2 years of maternity leave, and they go back exactly where they left at that case on, because they have a low birth rate. They so value birth and so on, and that should be a model the whole world develops instead of constantly trying to. Yes, exactly. Anyway, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. I just want to say one thing to everyone. First of all, we're going to have a 10-minute break for minute because we went a little bit. I just want to say thank you very much to anyone joining in on Zoom, and thank you for your questions before and during. You can feel free to continue the conversations. And just to say that I think that the goal, which I hope that you feel that we met today, is just to really broaden your minds to the debates, the sensitivities, the changes, and really the world of what's going on in all of these issues. And hopefully you can now be more cognizant of them. And in taking Jacob's question, that everyone should at least feel responsibility to be thinking of these issues and doing what they can. And so thank you very much.
Thank you.
All of coming every year.